Welcome to meeting number 143 of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Before we begin the meeting, I want to remind all in-person participants to read the best practices guidelines and the cards on the table. These measures are in place to protect the health and safety of all participants. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, November 21st, 2024, the committee is commencing its study of community safety and emergency preparedness, transport of dangerous goods by rail. I'd like to welcome our witnesses joining us today, colleagues. We have from the Department of Transport, Michel Bellin, Acting Director, General Transportation of Dangerous Goods. Welcome to you. We have Stephen Scott, Director General, Rail Safety. Welcome to you as well. And we have from the Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation and Safety Board, Monsieur Johan Marier, Chair. Bienvenue. And Vincenzo De Angelis, Director, Investigations, Rail and Pipeline. Welcome to you. We'll begin with opening remarks, and for that, I will turn the floor over to you, Mr. Scott. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Bon après-midi, Monsieur Président et membres.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members.
As the Director General of Rail Safety and Security at Transport Canada, I am joined today by my colleague, Michel Bellin, Acting Director General of the Transportation of Dangerous Goods Program. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we are gathered today is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. Thanks very much again for the opportunity to speak with you today about the transportation of dangerous goods by rail. As the regulator, Transport Canada is responsible for the administration and oversight of safety and security in the federally regulated rail sector. The Rail Safety and Security Program comprises of about 175 inspectors who conduct about 40,000 inspections and 20 safety audits every year in the rail mode. In addition, the Transportation of Dangerous Goods Program oversees the safe and secure movement of hazardous materials across all modes of transport, including by rail. This program includes 112 inspectors who conduct about 4,000 inspections annually. Since the Lac Mégantic tragedy in 2013, Canada's rail safety and dangerous goods regime has undergone fundamental changes. In addition to an enhanced oversight posture through increased inspections, data-driven and risk-based planning and stronger enforcement tools, such as administrative monetary penalties, Transport Canada has advanced a continuous cycle of policy and regulatory modernization. This includes stricter requirements related to train securement, track standards, tank cars, and emergency response plans, speed restrictions for trains carrying dangerous goods, new duty and rest rules to mitigate fatigue risks of employees in safety-critical positions, elevated safety standards for train brake testing and maintenance, new grade crossings regulations that improve safety at road crossings, and assisting in the advancement of new technologies that can improve safety. In May 2022, this committee issued a report with 33 recommendations for improving railway safety in Canada. I am pleased to report today that of those 33 recommendations, 31 have been completed, or we have actions underway to complete. This is being done through existing legislative and regulatory authorities already available to the department. Over the last number of years, we have seen some positive indications of downward trends in accident rates. For example, reporting from the Transportation Safety Board indicates that in 2023, there were 914 rail accidents in Canada. This represents a 12% decrease from the 10-year average. However, we know the risk picture and operating environment is constantly evolving and that challenges remain. We look forward to the committee's recommendations as part of the current study to inform future policy directions.
I would now like to turn to the recent train derailment that occurred in Longueuil, Quebec. On November 14th, a Canadian National train derailed 8 cars in a rail yard. Of those, 6 were carrying dangerous goods. 1 tank car, which was carrying hydrogen peroxide, was punctured. During derailments, railway companies are obligated by regulation to take immediate mitigation actions.
And supporting local emergency first responders, deploying resources to assist with emergency management and remediation, and advising the Transportation Safety Board and Transport Canada. In this instance, and in accordance with standard operating procedures, Transport Canada was in immediate communication with the railway company involved to verify that the emergency response plan was being implemented and to provide technical advice on remedial actions. I will conclude with a few comments on Canadian National's current operating restrictions impacting VIA's new train sets in the Quebec City-Toronto corridor. As I understand, this is also an area of study by this committee. For clarity, this issue is unrelated to dangerous goods. Transport Canada is aware that Canadian National is requiring restrictions at about 300 grade crossings for Via Venture trains. Based on information from CN, we understand the rationale is to ensure consistent activation of the grade crossing warning systems at these locations. The net result is that Via trains are required to reduce their speed when they approach these crossings, and that is adding travel time onto Via's routes in the corridor. Transport Canada is closely monitoring the situation and advancing our own due diligence review to ensure there is no threat to safety. If there are additional measures from a safety perspective we need to take as the regulator, we have the existing tools to be able to do that. Je vous remercie encore une fois et nous serons heureux de répondre à vos questions.
Thank you, and we be happy to answer questions. Now we have Mr. Marier. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting the Transportation Safety Board of Canada to discuss the important topic of rail safety. The TSB is independent and operates at arm's length from other government departments and agencies. We report to Parliament through the President of the King's Privy Council for Canada, and this lets us be impartial, free from any real or perceived external influence. Comme vous le savez peut-être, notre mandat et notre seul but est de...
As you may know, our mandate and our sole purpose is to promote the safety of air, rail, marine, and pipeline transportation within the federal government's modes of transportation by conducting independent investigations, identifying safety deficiencies, causes, and contributing factors, making recommendations, and issuing reports. It's also important to clarify what the TSB does not do. We are not empowered to determine civil or criminal liability. And though the TSB is often among the first to arrive at the scene of an accident, we do not act as first responders.
Safety continues to be top of mind for the TSB, and I'd like to share some rail safety statistics. In 2023, 1,235 rail occurrences were reported to the TSB. This included 321 incidents and 914 accidents, 6 of which resulted in the release of dangerous goods. This represents a 9% decrease from 2022 in accidents and a 12% decrease from the 10-year average. There were a total of 67 transportation-related fatalities in 2023. 53 of those were trespassing fatalities, and 13 were crossing accident fatalities. No fatalities were related to a release of dangerous goods. Since its creation in 1990, the TSB has issued 154 recommendations to the regulator and the rail industry. As of March 2024, 89.6% of the responses to these rail recommendations have received the board's highest rating of fully satisfactory. Nous examinons actuellement les progrès réalisés par l'organisme de réglementation.
We are currently reviewing the progress made by the regulator and the industry in relation to the TSB Watch List, a program that highlights key safety issues. The inadequate safety measures pose risks not only to the rail industry, but also to the public, communities, and the environment.
There are 5 watch list safety issues affecting the rail sector, including 3 multimodal issues. The multimodal issues are fatigue management in freight train operations, safety management, and regulatory surveillance. The 2 rail-specific issues are following signal indications and unplanned and uncontrolled movements of rail equipment. In regard to following signal indications, train crews are required to identify and communicate the signal indications among themselves and then take appropriate action in how they operate the train. However, when crews miss or don't follow a signal indication, in the absence of physical fail-safe defenses, it could result in a collision or a derailment. From 2004 to 2021, there has been an annual average of 35 reported occurrences in which a train crew did not respond appropriately to a signal indication displayed in the field, and we have seen a number of concerning occurrences lately. The board has been calling for physical fail-safe train controls on train for decades. In 2022, the board recommended that Transport Canada require major Canadian railways to expedite the implementation of physical fail-safe train controls on Canada's high-speed rail corridors and on all key routes. So far, the most optimistic timeline referenced by Transport Canada for the implementation of such a system, which will be called Enhanced Train Control in Canada, is 2030. Until then, the rail transportation system relies mostly on administrative defenses to protect against such occurrences. Les mouvements non contrôlés sont des...
Uncontrolled movements are low probability events. However, when they do occur, they can have catastrophic consequences, especially if dangerous goods are involved, as was the case with the derailment case in Lac Mégantic, which killed 47 people and destroyed much of the downtown area. Following this investigation, the TSB made 5 recommendations. 2 of these recommendations are still active and on the watch list.
Over the years, there has been significant progress in addressing safety deficiencies and implementing the TSB's recommendations. However, there is still much work that can be done to improve rail safety and to mitigate the potential impacts to people, communities, and the environment. Thank you. We are ready to take your questions.
Merci beaucoup. We'll start our line of questioning today with Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, and appreciate you all being here in person. And I want to start off just sort of level setting in terms of, several of you mentioned the numbers, but we'll just go through them again. How many train rail accidents were there in 23-24?
Okay. So accidents, 914. That is in 2023.
Yep.
We don't have the data yet for 2024 because the year is still ongoing, and we compile the data at the end of the year.
Any idea of whether it's going to be an increase or decrease, or stay the same?
Do you have any idea, Vince? Or,
I think it's a little early right now for the compiling, but yeah, I'd say it's on track, similar to previous year.
Okay, for 2023, of those 914, how many involved dangerous goods?
So, well, we have the data for accidents involving dangerous good releases.
Okay.
So, and that's 6. 6 accidents in 2023 involved a release of dangerous goods.
And what injuries or fatalities were a result of the 6 that involved the release
None.
of dangerous goods?
No. As a matter of fact, the last fatalities that were directly related to a release of dangerous goods were in Lac-Mégantic in 2013.
Okay. How does the accident rate compare, or incident rate compare, between moving petroleum on rail versus moving it through pipelines?
It's very hard to compare the two because the two modes of transportation are so different.
Well, according to the Fraser Institute in 2015, it said that shipping oil by rail was 4.5 times more likely to result in an incident as opposed to pipelines. Does that sound like that could be reasonable?
As I said, it's very hard to compare the two. I don't know if you have additional.
Yeah, I can add. We don't compare normally the two different modes. They have different risks. Basically, from our perspective, whichever mode of transport is used, we look to ensure that any risks or any issues are mitigated and identify those through our investigations.
Don't you think that would be a useful area of study for, in fact, as a committee member, I might even go so far as to say that's something you should look at, as that's a real live comparison, because I know certainly through watching the train go by through my riding of Northumberland and Peterborough South, I see oil tank after oil tank after oil tank, and that has could have an incredibly devastating impact if relatively small things were to go wrong. Whereas the incident of pipelines is 4.5 less likely. Don't you think it makes sense to study that?
Well, there are ways to transport petroleum by rail safely, and which is why we have been issuing recommendations over the past years, a lot of which have been addressed as fully satisfactory. So there are ways to do it safely, and it's our job to identify where there are deficiencies and push for change. So.
Yeah. When just switching subjects a little bit here, when dangerous goods go across private property, are owners of those private properties in any way given a warning?
I'm not aware of that. Do you know?
I think that would be more a question perhaps for Transport Canada or
Maybe
someone.
Transport Canada can answer this one.
Yeah, I can answer that. there is no warning given to private owners of land for when a train is going through. No.
Okay. And we're obviously doing everything we can to make sure that these derailments don't occur, but derailments happen and have happened, as was evidence in Lac-Mégantic. And so, if in fact you go through the recommendations you've changed since Lac-Mégantic, if you could. The significant changes you've made, if you could.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can talk about the recommendations, and they were addressed, most of them.
But
by
the
Transport Canada.
significance, why should particularly folks in Quebec feel safer than they did?
Well, I think one of the big ones is the phase out of the DOT 111 tank cars. It is a recommendation we made in the wake of Lac Mégantic, and these cars will be completely phased out as of April 30th, 2025, for the transportation of flammable liquids. So they were replaced by the newer standard, the TC 117.
Okay.
So that's a big one.
How much time do I have left? 1 minute. I just want to talk a little bit about, Mr. Scott, if you brought up the Via Rail and the slowing down. These are brand new locomotives. Do you understand what, or has CN told you specifically what in these new locomotives prevent the safety mechanisms from being aware of their presence? Is my understanding of that? What is the fault there? Why do they have to slow down?
So the information we have based on CN, because as I mentioned in my opening remarks, these are restrictions from CN at this point in time, is that there's some inconsistent activation by the wheels on the trains of the sensors that activate the grade crossing warning systems that would be a mile or 2 miles.
So is it just a problem with the compatibility of these new locomotives with the existing rail? Is that there's no fault, it's just compatibility? Is that your understanding?
I think that's a fair characterization. Yes, there's an inconsistency in the amount of in the way they're triggering the gates and the.
Thank you very much.
Bells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Lauzon.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. J'aimerais...
Mr. Lauzon, I'd like to thank all of our witnesses who are here today. I'd like to begin with Mr. Scott. You talked about technology that could improve rail safety. Could you tell us about technology that will help us in future and help us deal with the speed? Could you talk about this? Thank you very much for your question. It's a very important issue.
Our technology is a key part of safety going forward. We know that. A reference was made to train control technology, so that's something that we're advancing. These would be regulations that would compel railway companies to have smart driver assist technologies in trains, so we're advancing on that. There's another technology initiative underway in the department to advance what is called an automatic parking brake. So this would be an automatic backup brake on trains. So that's something else we're looking at. And our role as the regulator is to ensure whatever technologies do come online are safe, enhance safety, and we can provide a level of assurance that whatever technologies are being brought in and being advanced by industry and others improve safety in rail.
I understand that certain technologies will deal with practice management and the physical control in the trains. So we're going to use this technology rather than relying on physical inspections. Is that correct?
Is one of the risks we do look to mitigate. The role of technology can come in and intervene, for example, in the operation of a train if the locomotive engineer misses a signal, for example. So there are ways that technology can be incorporated to improve the operation of a locomotive, for example, and other technologies as well that will be looked at to improve the inspection of equipment, the inspection of brakes, so to really elevate the level and comprehensiveness of inspections. That's also something that's being looked at.
Peut-être, Monsieur Marier,
Mr. Marier, in your inspection and evaluation report, we know that commercial dangerous goods, well, we know that an inspection is done for these goods, but we saw what happened with Lac Mégantic. But do we need so many inspections for passenger trains where we're just carrying passengers? Could you talk about the difference between the freight trains and these passenger trains? You're talking about the in-end train control freight trains and passenger trains often use the same track. So we have to ensure that we can identify the signals properly, and for one reason or another sometimes someone might miss a signal. And when that happens, well, there's a risk of a collision. And it can be a collision between a freight train and a passenger train. So that's why we have to put in additional measures, administrative measures such as rules that control this. The model that we have with respect to rail inspection, physical inspection of the tracks in Canada, am I mistaken? Every time that an inspection or an evaluation takes place, the easiest way to resolve the problem is to simply lower the speed. The inspection, the maintenance of tracks, the investment in infrastructure. Could you talk about the state of our rails and what do we need to do to improve our railway network? Perhaps Mr. Scott is better able to address that question.
Merci beaucoup pour la...
Thank you for your question.
Track speeds are tied to condition and class of track in Canada. There's five different classes of track, and maximum speed limit on a particular corridor is tied to a progressively augmented level of inspection requirements, infrastructure requirements, and so that's generally speaking how the track system operates, and that incentivizes investment in rail infrastructure to a higher level and an increased level of inspections.
Est-ce que, dans un monde idéal,
in an ideal world, could a train, for instance, going between Quebec City, Montreal, Windsor, would it be more advantageous if this type of train had its own set of tracks? Because the problem that we are hearing about is that all the trains share the same tracks. And that's where the problem lies, particularly at intersections. And in talking about intersections, are the same intersections that are problematic each and every time there's an issue?
short answer?
I can answer very quickly. So in the corridor, the high frequency rail project that others in the department are advancing are intended to get at that issue, right, of a mixed freight passenger network in the corridor, to have a dedicated passenger network. So that's from a service perspective, but it's also good from a safety perspective as well. So you have dedicated lines for both passenger and freight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelou-Duval. À vous la parole, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming here today. I'll begin with Mr. Marier from the Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation and Safety Board. Last November 14th, there was a derailment in Longueuil, where there was a release of hydrogen peroxide, and it affected a region of 800 meters. It blocked traffic. It caused problems. It was talked about to great length in the media. This had a major impact, particularly when you consider that this was a dangerous good. My question is, I know that the TSB did an investigation, but did you send a team there on November 16th? In your opening statement, You you said that you were often the first responder, but you went there 2 days later. What led to this? Why did it take so long for you to get there? I'm going to answer your question in two parts. This accident in Longueuil is still being evaluated by our investigators. As you said, we sent investigators there on the site. They've looked at the event. They've talked to people. They've looked at the cars. And once we've completed the investigation, it's a complicated issue. So sometimes an investigation to take anywhere from a few days to a few weeks. So in the next few days, we will hear about what the investigation determined. As for the deployment of the team, I'll turn to my colleague. No, we sent a team there on the very day of the incident. So there were 9 other investigators were sent 2 days later. And why is it that you decided to? What leads you to investigate something or not? What are your criteria? What criteria do you use? We have a policy with respect to the classification of the incident that's been developed by my colleagues, which determines how you should classify an incident and to what extent something needs to be investigated. And there are certain criteria. I don't want to list them all, but we ask ourselves things like, can we learn anything from the incident? You understand that we've had over 3,000 incidents that occur. We can't do investigations for each and every one of them, so we have to make a selection. Can we learn anything to improve security by doing a certain investigation? To your knowledge, are there any incidents similar to that of what took place in Longueuil, or any other incidents like that take place? When you're talking about the release of dangerous goods, we have about 4 incidents per year where we have to investigate. We always consider what's involved. Do we know what caused this incident? We haven't really been informed. Is the situation now under control? The information that's been gathered, well, I can't really talk to you about that today, but we're going to wait until the investigation has been completed first. Do we have any additional? Mr. Scott, do you want to add any additional information? Yeah. On our side, our evaluation or inspection is ongoing. We have a preliminary report, but we don't have enough concrete information as to determine the cause. I'm a little bit surprised by this because a month has elapsed, and so why did this occur in the first place? We don't like to comment on ongoing investigations because during the course of an investigation, certain things can change. We communicate, we talk about what's happened, but we have to look at the causes. The cause and contributing factors are determined by the board. Can we expect to have the report soon? Once the complete investigation is done, well, it all depends on the depth of the evaluation. Could take 6 months up to 18 months. It depends on how deep we have to probe during the course of the investigation. And there's no obligation for the rail company or Transport Canada to tell the public what's going on, something that's happened in their neighborhood. We have to alert the public to any issues. We did this, and we've done this frequently. We get the information, and we determine to whom the information needs to be forwarded. Our mandate gives us the ability to do that. So if there are any concerns, safety concerns, we do communicate this. Thank you very much. Now we have Mr. Backrack.
6 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome, gentlemen. I initiated these hearings as a representative of a region that has seen a dramatic increase in the transportation of dangerous goods by rail. And while that development has brought with it some incredible economic benefits for communities, it also raises a lot of questions for the people who live along the rail corridor. I think people deserve answers to their questions, and they deserve the assurance that their life and their property is safe from the transportation of dangerous goods. And even perhaps more importantly, first responders who are responsible for responding to incidents when things go wrong and put their life on the line, dedicate their time to protecting their neighbors, they have questions as well, and I believe they deserve answers. So I was hoping the focus of these hearings could really be on the emergency response of communities. I understand there's a lot of information about risk reduction, and that is important for sure. But I don't think any of that reduces the need for communities to have adequate plans in place that protect them in the case that something goes wrong. And I see you all nodding, so I assume that you agree with that statement. So I wanted to talk a little bit and open my questioning with some questions about some of the more high consequence scenarios that could face a community that sees unit trains of dangerous goods parked in rail yards or moving through the community in close proximity to where people live and work. And my first question, I think this would go to Mr. Bellin. I hope I'm pronouncing that okay, sir. Is a major fire involving tank cars full of dangerous goods the kind of situation for which communities along rail corridors should be prepared to respond?
Absolutely, they should be prepared to respond. And we've done actually quite a bit. We've worked a lot with the communities, with the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs, to develop some resources for communities to be able to better plan. One of those resources is a document called "You Are Not Alone," and it's emergency response planning for rail incidents involving flammable liquids. And the purpose of that document is to assist local communities to plan and prepare for potential rail incidents involving the transportation of dangerous goods, specifically flammable liquids, crude oil, diesel fuel, and gasoline. We've also got the 24-hour Canutech Center, right, which is a center that is staffed by chemists and experts in dangerous goods who will provide real-time advice to first responders, 24-hour advice.
If I may, I'm going to try to get through about 6 or 7 questions. I only have 6 minutes, so I appreciate the information.
Okay.
I did share with you prior to the meeting a page from the Emergency Response Guidebook to which Transport Canada contributes.
Yes.
And this table on page 359 talks about BLEVEs, boiling liquid evaporating vapor explosions. I'm sure as the Director General for Transportation of Dangerous Goods, you're familiar with these events.
Yes.
Extremely high consequence events with massive destructive force. I'm just wondering if you could, based on the table, the way I read it, the minimum time, if you could share with the committee the minimum time to BLEVE failure for a tank car experiencing full torch condition. So this would be a tank car with 140,000 liters of dangerous goods, such as propane on board.
Yeah, I'll have to take that back to my experts.
No, but it's in the table that the experts created. It's 9 minutes.
Okay.
So from full torch condition,
Yep.
9 minutes until this tank car turns into a bomb. Mm-hmm. Now, if you could, according to the table, what is the minimum evacuation radius for a potential BLEVE involving a car carrying 140,000 liters of propane?
The minimum evacuation distance is 1,715 meters, according to this.
So 1.7 kilometers. So am I reading it correctly that you would have to evacuate a 1.7 kilometer radius to avoid a BLEVE, which can occur within 9 minutes of a car reaching full torch condition? Mm-hmm. 9 minutes. That's what the table says, yeah. How quickly after a derailment could a full torch condition occur?
I couldn't answer that. I'd have
Okay, like it can occur very quickly after a derailment.
Yeah.
Is the capacity of communities to evacuate rapidly in such a situation evaluated as a part of approving emergency response assistance plans?
Yes, in an emergency response assistance plan, you are looking at the equipment that is available, the technical advice.
No,
or the
but
technical
specifically
experts.
evacuations plans. Evacuations plans.
I'll have to consult with my experts on that one.
Okay. If you could get back to the committee, it would
Yep.
be appreciated.
Yes.
One of the techniques for reducing the risk of a bleve is to spray it continuously with water. Does Transport Canada evaluate the municipal water supplies to ensure there's adequate flow to maintain that spray of water on a tank car for cooling for the amount of time required to empty the car of dangerous goods during an incident, a
I'll
fire?
have to I'll have to confirm that with my experts.
Okay, if you could get back to the committee, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
The bleve table is based on events involving a single tank car. Is it fair to assume that a unit train composed of dozens of tank cars, a bleve event involving such a train, would be of greater consequence than the numbers indicated in the table?
I think that's fair to say, yes.
Okay. The emergency response distance, which is also indicated in the table for a potential bleve involving the same tank car, is 457 meters. Do I read it correctly that first responders should not get within 457 meters of a tank car that is at risk of bleve?
That's what the chart says, yeah.
How do the first responders put the water on the car to cool it if they can't get within 457 meters of it? I've seen our fire departments work. They do incredible work. They can't spray water that far. How do they do it?
Backrack, that is a phenomenal question, and I'm sure we're going to get a response to it in the next round. Thank you very much. I'm also going to provide a mirror to all of our witnesses so they can hold it up, and you can get a visual of me holding up the red flag for the last minutes. I could. Thank you, Mr. Backrack. Next, we have Mr. Muse. Mr. Muse, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the officials that are here. The train that, of course, was the subject of the tragedy in Lac Megantic traveled, if I'm correct, through Windsor, Detroit, Toronto, Montreal before its tragedy. And so I want to pick up on the questions from my colleague, Mr. Lawrence. We can talk all we want about, phasing out of cars, producing of some guide or document that I suppose you look at when a tragedy has occurred, the number of recommendations that have been implemented, but it seems obvious that longer term, the answer is that these oil and gas in particular should be traveling by pipeline and not on rail. And I realize that there's an issue with capacity of pipelines. Certainly because the current government has an aversion to building pipelines. But longer term, that is a better answer than all the risks that are being taken. And so I wonder whether the department has voiced that concern to other federal departments, to the ministers or the respective ministers of transport, that this is a better way to do things. We need to move away from this.
Thank you for the question. I think it's an important question. I don't know if I have an answer for you. Our colleagues at Natural Resources Canada are the lead for pipelines and oil and gas policy. The role of Transport Canada as the safety and security regulator touches air, marine, and road and rail, and so we're focused on the safety and security regulatory regimes for those modes. It's an important question. I think it'll have to be directed either to Natural Resources Canada, or we can take it back to see what information we can get in terms of the analysis you're looking for.
Okay, so I would suggest that Transport Canada has an obligation to Canadians to at least voice that concern with your counterparts in Natural Resources Canada. But we'll move on. Protective Direction number 36 mandates rail companies to share data on dangerous goods with communities. So does Transport Canada monitor the compliance with this directive to ensure the communities are receiving accurate and timely information?
Monitor the compliance of the rail companies providing the data. Is that the yes? So we do monitor compliance. We do ensure that we do look at if that the carriers are providing that data to municipalities, and we will follow up if we see that it's not being received.
So in your follow-up, do you talk to the municipalities to see if they're acting on that data and incorporating that into their emergency management plans or providing any feedback or input on that?
No, we're not. If we're asking the municipalities if they're using that data, we're not following up with the municipalities.
And so are they receiving the data in real time, or is it sort of periodic reports? How is that? It's
periodic reports. It's there's an annual report that the carriers have to produce of the top 10 dangerous goods that are flowing through that jurisdiction or that community. And then there are interim reports throughout the year that is about the volume and the nature of the dangerous goods that are flowing through that community.
Is there an impediment to doing that in real time or a system to do that, or is that just not feasible? Would that be a better approach? So you could you could be prepared or act upon it?
Sorry, so that they would share it in real time?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something we could look at. We haven't looked at that, but it's not right now. It's not in real time. No.
Are there other gaps from your perspective?
Not that no, I don't think so.
Okay. I'm going to leave it at that. I'll save the time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Muse. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Iacono. Mr. Iacono, la parole.
Mr. Iacono, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses for coming. And Mr. Bellon, could you clarify your role? What does Transport Canada do exactly? And what are you responsible for with respect to the railway safety for the transportation of goods and passengers? And what's your strategy to communicate for Canadians who are listening to us today? Thank you for your question. As for the transportation of dangerous goods,
promotes public safety in the transportation of dangerous goods by all modes of transports, alors non seulement ferroviaire, mais de tous les modes de transport.
So for all modes of transport, not just railway.
Regime that supports public safety, economic growth, and innovation. Alors we conduct oversight of the transportation of dangerous goods to ensure that that entities are following the Act and the regs, the Transportation of Dangerous Goods Act and regulations. We also conduct research. We'll conduct research on various types of tank cars or how different dangerous goods are reacting. And it's an agile, it's a data-driven, risk-based organization. So we base our inspections are based on risk. And based on risk. We have 118 inspectors across the country that will inspect all modes. Last year, we conducted over 4,000 multimodal inspections. Alors, nous avons fait au-dessus de 4,000 inspections.
So we have done over 4,000 inspections. We took over 6,000 measures to enforce the law. Does that answer your question? According to Transport Canada, why do we give priority to passenger trains when it costs millions of dollars in compensation? I think that's a question for my colleague. If I understood your question, why passenger trains don't have priority on the network and why priority is given to freight trains.
Earlier in my comments, I think in the corridor, so in the Quebec City Toronto area, there's a recognition that a dedicated passenger line is needed for economic safety reasons, and so the high frequency rail project is being advanced to do that, and so that would address the issue in the corridor. In the non-corridor, The infrastructure is owned by the railways, the main ones being Canadian National, Canadian Pacific, Kansas City. So they're the host railways, and they have agreements with tenant railways like Via Rail, like others, to use their infrastructure subject to those agreements and conditions.
Parce que j'ai pas beaucoup de temps,
If we had a network, a rail network such as HSL, something that this committee has already studied, would we have the same concerns that we have today when we determine who has priority on the track?
une courte réponse, s'il vous plaît.
A brief answer, please.
Très courte, le projet
Very briefly, the high-frequency train project will advance.
definitely move the needle and create the conditions for that in the corridor.
Une dernière question. Via Rail envisage-t-elle
Via Rail, does it intend to change its schedule between Quebec City and Windsor, given all of the delays that have been occurring?
So as I referenced in my opening remarks, CN is imposing operating restrictions on Via trains at some of its crossings in the corridor, and that is slowing down.
Oui, mais ma question, c'était est-ce que Via
But my question is, Via Rail going to change the schedule for the trains because of what's been happening?
For Via to
mais
answer.
vous, en tant que Transport Canada, est-ce que vous allez
But would Transport Canada be advising them to do so? What role do you play to deal with this problem? What is your role exactly? Do you provide advice, or are you waiting for there to be a problem before you take action?
That's good for you.
Merci beaucoup pour la question. So
Thank you for your question.
as the safety regulator, we've launched a comprehensive due diligence review to assess the situation, provide assurances there's no threat to safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Merci, Monsieur Iacono. Prochainement, nous avons
Next, we have Mr. Barcelo Duval, 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to go back to the Longueuil issue because you didn't really answer all of the questions with respect to this incident. Mr. Merrier, we're still trying to determine whether there will be an investigation or not. And you also said that in order to determine the cause of the incident, there has to be an investigation. And I didn't really understand, is there really a process that compels rail companies to inform people of what's going on? My question for you is, if there's no investigation, how are people going to understand what happened in Longueuil? Are they entitled to know the causes of what happened during this day, where it had an impact on the entire city? In our opinion, we have to stick to our mandate. That is, choose those incidents amongst all of the others that are reported during the year and we have to decide whether to do an in-depth investigation or not. So, in terms of for Longueuil, a decision has not been made. I don't have much more information to provide you. We follow the same process as we use for any other incident that occurs. We assess the information and then we decide whether what classification should be given to the incident, and then we determine whether an investigation is warranted. How much time does it take to determine whether you decide to go ahead with an investigation or not? First of all, it takes about a month, so we should know within the next few days how we intend to proceed. Can I have any time? Do I have any time? Thank you, Mr. Barcelo Duval.
yours. You have 2.5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Bellon, the key routes risk assessment. So key routes are sections of the rail corridor that see a particularly significant volume of dangerous goods transported along them. Who conducts a key routes risk assessment? Mr. Scott.
The railways conduct them. based on 28 risk factors.
So, from the rules governing the key routes risk assessments, this is from Transport Canada's website, it says that key routes risk assessments include assessing, quote, emergency response capability and capacity along the route, including training of local fire services and municipalities with respect to the volumes and types of dangerous goods being transported. Does Transport Canada have a training level, a capacity, a capability that they define, that your department defines as sufficient to protect communities?
So our role, once we, so under the rules, the railways are obligated to follow certain requirements with regard to dangerous goods trains. Mm-hmm. One of them is conducting an elevated risk assessment, which mm-hmm. they submit to Transport Canada. We don't approve them. We look at them. We conduct a due diligence review on their risk assessments. And we make a call whether we need to follow up through an inspection, through other oversight measures to ensure ourselves that the appropriate level of mitigation measures are being put in place. So that's the Transport Canada.
So is there, you just used the word appropriate level. Does Transport Canada define an appropriate level for the capability, capacity, and training level for local fire services and municipalities?
We would look at it more globally, so I'm not aware that we have a specific discrete gauge for that particular indicator. We would look at it more on a global risk level.
Global as in around the world, or global as in across all risks? Or
in aggregate across the 28 risk factors, we would look at it from that perspective.
So you're asking the railways to assess the capacity of communities to respond to emergency incidents, and yet there's no way that Transport Canada looks at the information they provide and says, yes, that looks sufficient, or no, that doesn't look good enough for events involving the goods that you're transporting. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, again, so we look at the risk assessment in its totality.
I don't know what that means in its totality. Like
we do a comprehensive assessment of the information and the risk assessment and mitigation measures that the railway provides to us. And we're not a first responder at Transport Canada, but we do need to make sure that the railways are taking those factors into consideration when they're designing their own operations and emergency plans as the regulated entities.
Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Next, we'll go to Mr. Viss. Mr. Viss, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I almost want to follow along Mr. Bacharach's line of questioning in respect to key routes risk assessment. As some of you are aware, I represent Canada's #1 riding, Mission Matsqui Fraser Canyon, which also experienced the #1 disaster in the history of Canada, which was massive flooding and washouts of both the CN and CP rail lines in 2021. So specifically, I'd like to request, as part of this study, that Transport Canada provides risk assessment information that they've received from both the CN and CP railway regarding the Fraser Canyon. And I reference the Fraser Canyon specifically because these are rural and remote areas with small Indigenous communities, and but some of the most dangerous parts of Canada's overall transportation network, going to the Port of Metro Vancouver, for example. And just out of curiosity, in respect to the Fraser Canyon, what risk factors, are in place to examine the potential impact on our iconic BC salmon stocks in those remote and rural areas?
So I don't have the details of the risk assessment for that particular incident that the member is referring to, Chair. I'm happy to take it back to see what information we could provide in that particular instance, recognizing its importance.
Assessments you receive from CN and CP, that's not private information. That can be provided to this committee, correct?
I would have to check. There might be some commercially confidential information in there, but it would really depend on the case, on the particular case.
Transport Canada undertake any special risk assessment after there was more than 30 washouts on Canada's major transportation routes in the Fraser Canyon following the landslides and fires of 2021?
So again, under the rules, the railways conduct the risk assessments for their operations, and I'm happy to check and provide what I can on those. I don't know if Transport Canada would have done our own risk assessment. I don't have any indication. I don't know if we have that or not. I'm happy to check.
Does in that area there is daily shipments of metallurgical coal and oil going to the Port of Metro Vancouver? What analysis has Transport Canada done on the possible impact our natural resources in the case of a spill or another natural disaster like the washouts would have on our iconic salmon species?
So again, Transport Canada as the safety regulator wouldn't conduct assessments like that. There other government departments may have looked at it. It's an important question. I'm happy to take that back and check what has been done.
Yes. When I'm talking to my constituents, they're going to say to me, Brad, I see all the metallurgical coal. I see, we just wish we had more pipelines, that the Trans Mountain pipeline was just that much larger, because we feel safer using pipelines than all of this crude oil being transported in an iconic area that is iconic. Sorry, of course it's iconic. An iconic area for our natural, our wild salmon stocks. And I can't give them an answer as to what Transport Canada would do when and if there is another disaster like we experienced in 2021. If you haven't been to the area, you guys should check out what happened at Jackass Summit. There was a portion of the highway about the size of 2 football fields completely washed out. And they only just finished doing that work right now. So this is really top of mind for many people in the area. And any information you could provide to this committee would be important, because we want to protect our salmon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Viss. Next, we'll go to Mr. Badaway. Mr. Badaway, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for coming out today. I'm going to try and drill down, and I think a lot of the questions may be similar, but I want to give you guys an opportunity to really drill down on it and think of anything that you haven't mentioned yet in particular areas that you've been asked about. And first off is risk mitigation. So my first question, very simple. What proactive measures does the TSB recommend for rail companies to minimize risks when transporting dangerous goods through densely populated or environmentally sensitive areas?
So you have to understand that there are already a number of rules that are in place. There are a set of rules that we call the rules respecting key trains and key routes that were put in place following a Megantic and modernized a few years ago. So these rules put a number of requirements on the railways regarding speeds. When they cross, when the trains go across communities, they have to slow down even more. For key roads, are also subject to increased maintenance requirements, to risk assessments, and there's also an exchange of information between the communities. So work is already there's already a lot of work that has been done to help protect these communities following our recommendations.
Thank you. Actually, you answered my second question in that answer as well, so thank you for that. With respect to emergency preparedness, how does the TSB collaborate with provincial, municipal, emergency response agencies to prepare for rail incidents involving dangerous goods? I was a mayor for 14 years. We often had our exercises where we had emergency preparedness as the theme, not only for the community at large, but also within our team, and in different instances, different teams. Do you actually go through the same processes directly with municipalities to ensure that if something does happen, you're ready for it, right from the incident itself to then the effects of that incident on the community and even sometimes the surrounding communities?
Okay, so I can give you a response from my point of view, but I suspect you're going to get a more detailed response from Transport Canada. So the TSB, our mandate is to look at occurrences. So when there's an accident or an incident that happens, we do an investigation. So we're always looking backwards. So we're always looking at what happened, why it happened, and what can be done to prevent it from happening in the future. So
on how to perform before and during these incidents.
During an investigation, we identify safety deficiencies that were related to a specific response. Then yes, it's something that would be identified in our report, and eventually we could make a recommendation if we deem the risk to be high enough.
Mr. Scott? Or Mr. Galland?
Yeah, so in terms of your, working with municipalities and the provinces, we actually do a lot of awareness with provinces and municipalities, and we've participated in a number of exercises over the years with our folks at Canutech. They've conducted a number of exercises with various municipalities across the country, and as well, we have remedial measure specialists who are experts in incidents. They've also participated in a number of exercises with municipalities, and they're always looking for anybody who's willing who's interested in having an exercise, that we'd be more than happy to assist and help.
And the reason why I asked, well, twofold. One is the obvious reason why I answer the question. But secondly, in my past life, I had instances where we would have an incident and nobody stepped up from the federal level. And that's extremely frustrating, because now I have to rely on my fire chief to then take charge of the incident. And sometimes they may not be as intimate with the incident as you may be. And I'm not saying it was you; it was other agencies, quite frankly. But I've had that challenge. So what I'm looking for is having that protocol in place, so that when these do happen, you've already made recommendations from your end, and then from your end, you're following up on those recommendations that were made by the TSB. So you're confident that that's up to date and that's happening? Yes. Okay. Good. With respect to recommendations that the TSB makes to improve communications between rail operators and municipal governments and residents regarding hazardous material transport, is there anything that you would require from Transport Canada to make part of the processes that you involve yourself in?
Well, we currently don't have any active recommendations on that subject. As I mentioned, if we do get an occurrence that involves, a safety deficiency related to, communications, it is something that we would consider issuing a recommendation, certainly, if the risk is high enough. But we currently don't have any recommendations on that.
From Transport Canada side, and I guess this is a broader question, I guess for both TSB and Transport Canada. And it's very broad, and it was touched on earlier with respect to the TSB recommending any enhancements to community safety and emergency preparedness when it comes to transport of dangerous goods by rail, particularly in urban and rural areas where access to emergency response resources can vary significantly. And that's what I'm getting at. There's some sparse areas throughout the country. Do you actually involve yourself in recommendations with respect to capacity, capital capacity, to then therefore mitigate not only the risk itself, but the way and the means to deal with the risk, especially in more remote areas?
Well, again, it depends on if we have an occurrence that involves these issues. It is certainly something that we would be looking at during the investigation. But we're not our mandate requires us to look backwards and look at occurrences that happened. So there has to be an occurrence for us to have the mandate to investigate.
Well, just on that, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, I just have to ask the question. But so that said, do you not come up with recommendations when those instances do happen?
Sure. Yeah.
So if something happens, like what just happened recently with one of the railways, rail lines, where there was a problem, it wasn't a remote area, passengers were actually stranded for a long time. There was the recommendations that came out of that would then deal with those situations when they're remote areas.
Yeah. Well, so just to clarify, so when an occurrence is reported to us, we deploy investigators to the site. These investigators will assess the occurrence and determine whether or not we'll do a full investigation on the occurrence or not. If we decide to do a full investigation, then it can take a number of months before a report is produced, and then me and my colleagues on the board, we sit together and we decide if the risk of the safety deficiencies in the report is high enough to warrant issuing recommendations. So and not every investigation will lead to a recommendation. There needs to be a high risk with insufficient defenses. So, and when we assess that recommendation is warranted, then we'll issue the recommendation, and then the Minister of Transport has 90 days to respond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badaway. You're welcome. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou Duval.
Mr. Barcelo Duval, you have 6 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question, I'd like to begin with Mr. Merrier. In your opening statement, you said that there were 2 recommendations with respect to Lac Mégantic that were still active. What are these 2 recommendations? The first pertains to the safety management system the rail companies have for a long time. They've had to have safety management systems. They've had to have these for some time now. The issue is that they're not always efficient. In other words, this management system can be like a library with all these books, and we have to when employees report on something that's happened, well, then it has to be put on reported on. So it takes security measures in order to be efficient. And what we're seeing right now, yes, they do have security systems, but there's a problem with the effectiveness. Second recommendation pertains to physical defense measures to protect against uncontrolled movement. Can you tell us more about that? Absolutely. In order to prevent uncontrollable movements, we have to have administrative measures in place. These are rules, procedures, and the defense system is an electronic system that will intervene to prevent an incident should an employee make a mistake. Physical defense mechanisms are not always that present in railway systems, and therefore we are recommending that this no longer be the case, so that we have to look at defensive measures. When you talk about these measures, are you referring to these handbrakes that are used for individual cars, or there weren't enough of these brakes in the case of Lac Mégantic? Is this what you're talking about? With respect to the handbrakes on the trains, Transport Canada is working on this recommendation. We need an additional defense mechanism. Another example would be temperature detectors for the wheels to determine whether they're overheating or not. If there's a problem with a particular car, the detector will alert us to this. What you would like then is that we have an electronic system for all of the cars. Have I understood you correctly? Is that would be the impact of your recommendation? I could answer that question right now. We have a handbrake, but we have suggested a system, an automatic parking system, which would avoid the system with the pneumatic brakes. So this would be more mechanical, not just pneumatic. If we look back a bit, if I understand, in the case of the accident that occurred in Lac Mégantic, there were brakes that gave way because, I believe, because of a motor, or there was something that caused the brakes to come off because they hadn't used the handbrake as well. Is that there are pneumatic brakes? So there are a certain number of pneumatic and mechanical or handbrakes. And when they shut off the locomotive, there was insufficient number of cars that had these brake systems, and that's what caused the accident. So when you you shut the locomotive down, the pneumatic brakes are released. Is that true for all trains? No, that's a separate issue. They can keep the pneumatic brakes active, but the locomotive brakes are in addition to those pneumatic brakes. So we have to ensure that there's an adequate number of pneumatic brakes that are on each train set. And with respect to uncontrollable movements, do you see an increase or a decrease in the movement of in the number of uncontrollable movements? I'd say, I don't know if I have data here, but if I understand correctly, these are incidents that occur more frequently. Well, the crew has to observe all of the signal indications, and the movement of uncontrollable movements that can be catastrophic, as we saw on Lac Mégantic. So these two elements pose a risk that's quite high. But do you have any figures about the current trends? Yes. 2019, last year, there were 33 incidents. This year, it will be more or less what we saw last year. Thank you, Mr. Barcelo.
You have 6 minutes, sir.
Mr. Chair. I was a little bit surprised by the responses regarding the key routes risk assessment. So as I understand it, these are risk assessments that the government requires the rail companies to do. And they submit the risk assessments to the regulator, to Transport Canada, but Transport Canada does not approve them. And there is no definition of what an adequate risk assessment looks like. These risk assessments, I assume, are also confidential, Mr. Scott? Proprietary?
There might be proprietary elements in them.
Okay, are they available to community members who want to better understand the risk?
Well, in fact, railways have to, under the regulation, they have to consult municipalities when they're pulling the risk assessments together.
And are municipalities provided with the final risk assessments?
That I'm not sure.
Can you provide that to the committee? Thank you very much. Moving on to emergency response assistance plans. Now, these are plans that are required from the shippers of the products of dangerous goods that are approved by Transport Canada, correct? Correct. Yes. Okay. And those emergency response assistance plans include in them an evaluation or a plan for responding to dangerous goods events?
Correct. Yes.
And a description of the tools and strategies that will be used to respond?
Correct. It provides an ERAP will contain safety information, communication and plan implementation, roles and responsibilities, emergency response actions, the resources for the response, which includes personnel and equipment, mobilization and deployment, damage assessment, and then obviously training and exercises.
And in those ERAPs, yes, does Transport Canada have a definition of what a sufficient response plan looks like? Because Transport Canada approves these assistance plans,
yes,
there must be a systematic approach for evaluating whether the shipper's plans are sufficient to protect the community, correct?
There is yes, there are criteria for the approval of an assistance plan, yes.
And if they're deemed insufficient, the shippers have to amend them, I assume, and make them sufficient?
They're not approved, yes. Correct.
Okay. Now, it's common for these ERAPs to rely on local first responders, correct, as part of the response to emergencies involving dangerous goods?
It would be part of the response, yes.
And would these assistance plans look at the capacity of local first responders to adequately protect the community from incidents involving dangerous goods?
I'll have to get back to you on that one.
Okay, one would think that it would be logical that if the goal of the assistance plans is to protect the community, that your agency wouldn't approve a plan that doesn't achieve the goal of protecting the community, correct?
Yeah. You're not just looking at the capability of the response of the community, right? You're also looking at so the shipper actually has to have response contractors.
I
They have to-
understand.
yeah,
I understand.
right, to
But in the
complement
first 2 hours, it's usually up to the local fire department to respond. Right. And are these ERAPs also confidential or proprietary?
There is some proprietary information in them, yes. Yes.
Are they available to members of the public who, say, live along a rail corridor and want to know how they're being protected?
They are not at this time, no.
They're not available. Are they available to municipalities who ask for them?
That I'd have to check. No, I don't
Okay, if
believe
you
they
could
are. I
provide
don't
that to
believe
the
they are.
committee, that would be appreciated. Are they available to the fire departments that are part of the emergency response assistance plans?
I don't believe they are either.
They aren't. They aren't available to the first responders that are part
I'll
of the
have to
plan.
I'll have to
Like
verify that.
this is amazing. Where do you go from there? I'm baffled. I want to provide assurance to people in the communities I represent that they're being adequately protected by your department. You're the Director General of Transportation of Dangerous Goods, and yet I've asked dozens of questions that haven't had answers. Are first responders right to be concerned about the ability, the capacity, the resources, the tools that they have to protect communities from the products that you approve the shipment of?
Yes, but we do work a lot with communities and first responders and providing, like I mentioned before, we've provided them. There's actually free online training that is available for firefighters.
Are there any standards? Does Transport Canada have any standards for the training that first responders receive for responding to incidents involving dangerous goods?
There are competency guidelines.
Yeah.
There are competency guidelines for first responders. Yes.
So when the shippers provide voluntary training opportunities for local first responders, does Transport Canada evaluate which communities have trained personnel as part of the emergency response assistance plans? These plans are only looked at every, 6 or 7 years?
Depending on the plan, yes.
Okay, so how does Transport Canada get a global sense of whether local first responders have adequate training and capacity to respond to dangerous goods events?
I'll have to.
Hard to say.
I'll have to go back and ask the question.
Okay, so we have confidential plans that include local first responders, but local first responders aren't able to access those plans. We have a lack of standards when it comes to the sufficiency of those plans. Is Transport Canada currently engaged in any community level emergency response capacity assessments at the local level in Canada?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. My understanding is that Transport Canada is involved in one. It involves the Kitsum-Kalem First Nation and the Kitselis First Nation. It's in the riding I represent near the community of Terrace. And our hope is that it's going to produce information on the community's capacity to respond to these events because the community is very concerned. I think it's logical to conduct similar capacity assessments in every community along the rail corridor, because there are tens of thousands of people that are at risk if we see major events like the Bleve events that I described earlier. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair, but I'm deeply troubled by the answers we've received today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Backrack. Next, we'll go to Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Very much, and I'm going to follow up on some of my colleagues from the NDP's questions. And so I have in my riding, I have the towns of Newcastle, Cobourg, Port Hope, Brighton, amongst others, Colborne, that are right along the railway. And as I said, you drive by and you can see on a regular basis petroleum cart after petroleum cart after petroleum cart going by. In earlier testimony, you have said that in your evidence that it was 1 point that in order to be a safe distance from a Blevin event, it would have to be 1.7 kilometers, and that would have to be done in 9 minutes. Do you have any confidence that there's an evacuation plan in the town of Cobourg, or could you table any evidence that the town of Cobourg has an evacuation plan if a Blevin event happens?
I don't have that information.
How about the town of Port Hope?
I don't have that information either.
How about the town of Brighton?
Don't have that.
How about the town of Newcastle? So you can see that this causes concern for I think all of my colleagues, including myself. And then you were also said in your evidence that there are plans to handle an event. And I do want to say I understand that your department's worked hard to limit the amount of currents, but really with these type of incidents, as Lac Magnetic demonstrates, it only takes one incident to kill 47 people to level 30 buildings, and so is it your evidence? Did I understand it correctly that the plans to deal with such an event aren't currently disclosed to first responders?
with my experts.
But at this point, you can't say confidently to the committee that the town of Cobourg has first responders who have been trained to deal with these events.
I don't have that information, no.
And the same for the town of Port Hope,
Yes.
town of Newcastle,
Yes.
town of Brighton. Yeah. Now, we've of course are familiar with the tragedy of Lake Magnetic, which I said 47 people died, 30 children were orphaned, 30 buildings were leveled. Can you tell me one similar incident involving a pipeline that's occurred in the last 50 years?
I'll have to ask my colleague I can't answer that.
So we do investigate pipeline incidents and accidents, and a number of these incidents are reported to us every year.
What's the amount of fatalities in the last 50 years at a pipeline?
There haven't been any.
So if you're serious about reducing these types of incidents and securing safety, does it not make sense that you have a safety abatement strategy in front of you? They're called pipelines. To study that and maybe bring that to attention to the minister? 47. That's how many people died. 47. 0 at pipelines.
I don't really know how to answer that question. As I mentioned, we try not to compare the two. There are ways to transport dangerous goods by rail.
And you can't provide us with any assurance that right now the town of Port Hope, the town of Cobourg, the town of Brighton, the town of Newcastle are adequately equipped to respond to an incident involving dangerous goods and rail that is literally probably traveling through my riding right now. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. Next, we'll go to Ms. Koutrakis. Ms. Koutrakis, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to our witnesses for being here today. What measures are in place to ensure rail companies prioritize safety over cost cutting? Do you know?
Thank you for the question. So, rail from a safety and security perspective is a highly regulated environment. There's multiple pieces of legislation with dozens of different regulations that layer upon railways various expectations and requirements and obligations for safety and security. And that ranges from everything from track conditions to equipment and brake to operating parameters and protocols. And we, as the regulator, our role is not to deliver for the railway companies on their regulatory obligations. We send inspectors to the field and make sure they're meeting their obligations.
And how often, how frequently are railways and their safety practices inspected? And what are the consequences for non-compliance?
So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we do about 40,000 inspections every year and 20 safety audits, and then that's in addition to what's done on the dangerous goods side. So every day, Transport Canada inspectors are out ensuring that railway companies are meeting their obligations. We take a graduated enforcement approach. So if a non-compliance or a deficiency is identified, that can start with, it's a spectrum of actions that are available to us as a department. That can start with a warning letter, a notice and order. It can escalate to an administrative monetary penalty, all the way to the suspension of the safety license, which a railway company needs to operate. That's an extreme scenario. But there's a very much a spectrum of levers available to the department to take action if required.
How often, Mr. Scott, do we have audits that show that railway companies are not meeting the expectations?
So we've been doing safety management system audits since the early 2000s. We started to do effectiveness audits based on the recommendations from this committee, from the Transportation Safety Board, from the Office of the Auditor General. We started that in April 2022. So since April 2022, all the audits we do have an effectiveness component. So that's really going deeper in the audits to look at not just what railway companies are doing at their corporate level in terms of safety protocols, but how they're doing and is it having an impact on their performance metrics for safety.
And how does your department incorporate the lessons learned from past incidents into future policies and regulations?
So we have a continuous cycle of policy and regulatory modernization, and it's risk-based. So the trends that we see on the ground from our on-site inspections, the trends that we see through the safety audits, feed back into our regulatory agenda and really helps guide and inform the future actions and priorities that we're pushing forward as the regulator.
And I know probably you've answered this many times, but I can't stress how important it is to make sure that our long-term strategies are being developed to address increasing volumes of dangerous goods transported by rail. Can you advise this committee today what is being done in that regard?
Thank you for the question. As I said earlier, a lot of progress has been made in terms of the regulatory framework, in terms of our oversight posture, but we know there's more work to do. We are moving forward with an update to the safety management system regulations, so to really solidify and codify the effectiveness approach into regulation. We're moving forward with enhanced train control, which will address the risks around signals that colleagues from the Transportation Safety Board have spoke about. And we're advancing some of the technological pieces, the piece around the automatic parking brakes, for example. Transport Canada has done, that's a TSB recommendation to move forward with the automatic parking brakes. It's still in the prototype stage for freight railways, so we're doing research now with the National Research Council with other partners to help push and nudge that technology forward, so that's ongoing.
Thank you very much, Ms. Koutrakis. Prochainement, nous avons M. Barce-Duval. 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for Mr. Bélan, or perhaps someone else may want to answer. In 2016, Transport Canada published a report compelling rail companies to provide communities and first responders with a list of the dangerous goods that are going through their community. Why does the list only include 10 types of goods? They don't get information on everything that's being shipped through their neighborhood? I would imagine that the information on, well, I think that the decision made at the time was that the list would be limited to 10 different goods, the top 10. But there is any other type of regulation or that gives the people an idea of what comes after this top 10, or the rail companies have to issue reports talking about the volume and nature of goods being transported. This report is submitted every 3 months. So what's the purpose of the rule? The annual report is public. It's posted on our website. The interim 3 months reports are only given to the community. And the 3-month report is a list of the type of goods that go through the community, the volume and the nature of the goods. What do you mean by nature? The category or the product itself? The product itself. And just for the benefit of all, there are ERAPs for dangerous goods that are the responsibility of the railway cart, or are they reviewed by Transport Canada? But there's no communication or coordination with respect to these ERAPs between the rail companies and Transport Canada? You're talking about the ERAPs. Yes, that's right, the Emergency Response Assistant Plans. There's coordination between Transport Canada and the municipality and the railway company. Thank you very much.
For today, we have Mr. Backrack. Mr. Backrack, you have 2.5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, gentlemen, for being here today. Mr. Chair, I'd like to move the following motion. That Transport Canada provide the committee with all emergency response assistance plans related to the rail transport of dangerous goods between Prince George and Prince Rupert, British Columbia, and the key route risk assessment for the same.
Thank you very much.
And I'm certainly open to my colleagues amending it to add on the geographies that concern them particularly.
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. That Transport Canada provide the committee with all emergency response assistance plans related to the rail transport of dangerous goods between Prince George and Prince Rupert, British Columbia, and the key route risk assessment for the same.
Can you add Fraser Canyon?
D'autres commentaires, questions, idées?
Comments or questions? Do you want to add anything to the motion? I'd like to have include the corridors included in my region to this list. The Montreal-Sorel corridor, for instance. I'd like to have a list of these dangerous goods. That's my comment.
We would also like to add the Ontario corridor as well, right?
Okay, if I suspend for 2 minutes just so we can do this offline and then come back perhaps with something concrete? Okay, the meeting is suspended. witnesses for appearing here today. I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.